Welcome, traveler. We're glad you're here. Every story you hear is made with care and passion. If you enjoy it, please like, subscribe, and check out the other adventures waiting for you on our channel. Your support means the world. Thank you. We hope you enjoy the story.
Dawn bled across the horizon of an island time had forgotten. Waves whispered secrets to shores untouched by the modern world, their ancient conversation uninterrupted for 30,000 years. The inhabitants, perhaps the last humans who remembered how to live entirely without the outside world, stirred from their shelters as they had since before history began its recording. The tribal elder's hands moved in the morning light, scarred fingers guiding stone against wood. He added another mark to a pattern that spiraled across the massive trunk, a calendar or warning whose meaning had outlived its creators. Around him, the rhythm of existence continued its perfect, unbroken cycle. A hunter stood thigh-deep in turquoise shallows, spear poised. The sea turtle drifted below him, its shell iridescent beneath the surface. The hunter had been taught that each life taken required permission, gratitude, purpose. He whispered syllables older than any written language as the spear descended. The turtle's blood clouded the water. Then stillness seized them all. From youngest child to eldest grandmother, every human on the island stopped. Muscles froze, lungs ceased mid-breath, eyes fixed on nothing. 73 heartbeats passed in perfect silence. Then, as though awakening from the same dream, they turned their faces toward the sky. The hunter abandoned his prey. The elder's stone tool slipped forgotten from his grasp. Children stood motionless where they had been playing. The turtle's blood continued spreading through the shallows, the only movement in a suddenly immobile world. 1,000,000 kilometers from Earth, the James Webb Space Telescope drifted in the cold symmetry of space. Its gold-plated mirrors collected ancient light from the universe's earliest moments, while its sensors mapped atmospheric compositions of worlds that might harbor life. Beyond Neptune's orbit, something interrupted the darkness. For precisely 3.7 seconds, the telescope's connection to Earth severed completely. When telemetry resumed, impossible data cascaded through the system. Readouts showed contradictory measurements, temperatures simultaneously approaching absolute zero and exceeding that of stars, elements existing in quantum states that violated fundamental laws, radiation patterns arranged with the precision of mathematics. At Goddard, the physicist's coffee grew cold beside her keyboard. What began as instrument anomalies coalesced into recognizable patterns on her screen, elegant solutions to quantum problems she'd abandoned as unsolvable months ago. She reached for her phone to report the malfunction, fingers trembling not from fear, but from a scientist's unwilling recognition. This was not random. This was language. Before she could call her supervisor, every screen went black. Every device powered down. For 73 seconds, technology failed. When systems reactivated, all traces of the event had vanished from every database, every backup, every server. Only her memory preserved what she had witnessed. And even she, with her physicist's devotion to observable reality, wasn't entirely sure it had been real. Not yet. Dr. Eliza Novak had built her career on doubt. As an astrophysicist specializing in exoplanet atmospheric analysis, she'd developed a reputation for finding the flaw in every experiment, the contamination in every sample, the error in every calculation. Her colleagues called her the debunker behind her back and to her face. She wore the title as a badge of honor. In a field where wishful thinking could masquerade as breakthrough, her skepticism was her greatest asset. which made the equations, still lingering in her memory, all the more troubling. She'd spent the entire night reconstructing what she'd seen. Sleep had been impossible. By morning, she'd filled 3 whiteboards with calculations before wiping them clean again, suddenly paranoid about who might see them. Now, 26 hours after the incident, fatigue blurred the edges of her vision. "Coffee's disgusting here, but it's hot," said Dr. Harriman, appearing in her doorway. The telescope team director leaned against the frame, 2 steaming NASA mugs in his hands. "Brought you a fresh one. Looks like you're working on fumes." Eliza minimized the window on her screen before accepting the mug. "Thanks. Systems check. Came back clean. Whatever caused the outage, it wasn't on our end." He watched her over the rim of his mug as he took a careful sip. Nothing unusual in the backup logs either. She recognized his careful tone. He was fishing. "Good to know," she said, keeping her voice neutral. "Probably just a garden variety glitch. Cosmic ray hit the wrong circuit." "Probably," he agreed, too quickly. "You look like you've seen a ghost, though. Anything unusual before communications?" Dropped. Eliza had worked alongside Harriman for 3 years. He was methodical, conservative in his interpretations, and allergic to anything that threatened funding. He was also the last person she wanted to tell about mathematical solutions to quantum measurement problems appearing in telescope data, where they had no business existing. "Screen flickered a bit," she said. "Might need my prescription updated." Harriman nodded, satisfied with the mundane explanation. "Well, the higher-ups are breathing down my neck about the exoplanet survey. We're already behind schedule with the maintenance last month." "I'll get back to it right away," she said. After he left, Eliza locked her door and reopened the file where she'd been reconstructing the patterns from memory. The equations weren't just solutions to theoretical problems in quantum measurement. They were solutions to her problems, the ones she'd been working on privately for months. Elegant answers that resolved the contradictions in her own research into observer effects at the quantum level. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Rachel. "Did you feel that weird thing yesterday? Something happened at church. People are still talking about it. Call me." Eliza frowned. Their paths had diverged so completely from their shared beginning. Both raised under the suffocating strictness of their parents' religious fundamentalism, a household where questioning was sin, and blind faith was the only virtue. Their father's zealotry had driven them in opposite directions after his death. Rachel had fled to an even larger, more fervent megachurch, finding comfort in the very thing that had caused their childhood pain. Eliza had embraced science with the same absolutism her father had shown for Scripture, replacing his biblical certainty with the cold comfort of empirical evidence. They rarely discussed anything deeper than holiday plans anymore. Their fundamental divergence, Rachel doubling down on faith while Eliza rejected it entirely, had made real conversation impossible. She texted back, "Busy at work." Later, the response came immediately. "It's important." Pastor Richardson felt it, too. Even the news is starting to report similar things happening. Something's happening. Eliza set the phone down. First, impossible equations appearing in telescope data. Now, her devoutly Christian sister experiencing something weird at the exact same time. Coincidences existed. Her scientific mind insisted on this fact, but her instincts as a researcher were screaming otherwise. She opened her browser and searched for news reports. Nothing major appeared at first glance, but social media was buzzing with scattered accounts, momentary blackouts, strange sensations, collective pauses in various locations around the world, most dismissed as mass hysteria or technical glitches, but the pattern was too widespread to ignore completely. She pulled up her personal email on her tablet and searched for a name she hadn't contacted in years. Dr. Sarah Goldstein, a professor of comparative religion who specialized in mass religious experiences throughout history. They'd met at a conference on consciousness studies years ago, finding common ground despite approaching the mind from opposite directions. Eliza, through the physical processes of the brain, Sarah, through the cultural expressions of belief. Sarah, she wrote, "This is out of the blue, but I need your expertise. Have there been any reports of unusual religious experiences in the past 24 hours? Anything that might qualify as mass phenomenon?" It's related to a research question I'm pursuing. Eliza, before she could second-guess herself, she hit send. Then she turned back to her reconstruction of the equations. They were beautiful in their symmetry, perfect in their logic. They were also impossible. No random telescope malfunction could produce such patterns. Someone, or something, had reached into the most sophisticated scientific instrument humanity had ever placed among the stars and written mathematics that only she would recognize, and whatever had done it might have touched her sister too. The truth is, out there, a voice from an old TV show echoed in her mind. But unlike fiction, real scientific truth required evidence, verifiable, reproducible, objective evidence. Eliza Novak
Had none of that.
The Seabrook
Yet,
Memorial
but she knew how
Chapel
to find it.
rose from manicured grounds like a corporate headquarters that had found religion. Steel and glass caught the afternoon light, transforming it into a beacon visible from the highway, where Eliza's father had preached. Damnation in a building that smelled of wood polish and old hymnals. Pastor James Richardson delivered salvation through high-definition screens and acoustics engineered to carry his voice to the farthest seat without losing its intimate timbre. Eliza parked her government-issued sedan at the edge of the vast lot, where the asphalt met carefully staged wildflowers. She'd promised herself she'd never come here. Not after Rachel had spent years sending Richardson's books, YouTube sermons, personalized prayer cards. Scientific curiosity had overcome personal resolve. 27 reports now across 6 continents, all describing the same 73-second phenomenon. She needed first-hand accounts, not filtered through social media algorithms. The administrative wing operated with the quiet efficiency of a hedge fund. Volunteers in coordinated outfits staffed reception desks with practiced smiles. In the atrium, Richardson's latest book, Abundant Purpose, occupied a display worthy of an airport bestseller. The Commerce of Certainty, perfectly merchandised. "I'm here to see Pastor Richardson," Eliza told the receptionist, sliding her NASA credentials across the polished desk. She'd learned long ago that government identification opened doors where honesty might not.
"I'm sorry, he's not taking unscheduled meetings," the young woman replied, her smile professionally undiminished. "But I'd be happy to—" "It's about yesterday's incident," Eliza interrupted. "I'm conducting an official inquiry." The smile faltered.
Then, like a system experiencing its first error. "Oh, I see." She reached for her phone with newly uncertain fingers. One moment. 5 minutes later, Eliza was escorted through double doors into Richardson's formal office. The space had been designed to communicate success without ostentation. Leather furniture worn just enough to suggest use, original artwork selected for inspiration rather than investment, bookshelves holding volumes that appeared read rather than displayed. A glass model of the chapel's planned expansion wing caught light from floor-to-ceiling windows. Pastor James Richardson stood as she entered. He was younger than his television presence suggested, early 40s at most, with eyes that assessed her with the practiced attention of someone who'd built a career reading people's needs before they could articulate them themselves. His handshake landed precisely in the territory between firm and forceful. "Dr. Novak from NASA," he said, gesturing toward a chair, angled for conversational intimacy. "This is quite unexpected. How can I help our space program today?" Eliza caught the performance in his tone, the warm authority, the subtle humor establishing dominance through charm, a man who controlled conversations as naturally as breathing. "I'm investigating reports of an unusual incident yesterday," she said, remaining formal, as she took the offered seat. Multiple witnesses described a moment where everyone present seemed to pause simultaneously. "I understand something similar happened here." Richardson studied her, his expression shifting. The practiced welcome receded, replaced by something more genuine, curiosity, perhaps, or recognition. "You're not actually here in any official capacity, are you?" he asked, the insight catching her off guard. "NASA doesn't investigate religious experiences." Eliza considered manufacturing government interest, then abandoned the pretense. "No, this is personal research." His smile returned, reaching his eyes this time. "The truth, refreshing." He leaned back, posture softening. "Your credentials are—"
Real, though. Quantum physics at Goddard. Impressive. You checked me that quickly? He held up his smartphone. Modern ministry requires modern methods.
"So what brings a quantum physicist to investigate my congregation's experience?" "Similar incidents have been reported globally," she said, choosing precision over elaboration. "The scientific community is interested in understanding if there's a physical explanation." "And you immediately suspected a church." No accusation colored his voice, only a perceptive amusement. "Most of your colleagues would look for solar flares or electromagnetic anomalies first. I'm exploring multiple possibilities," she said, the practiced neutrality of a scientist accustomed to defending methodology. Richardson nodded, then stood with sudden decisiveness. "Walk with me." He led her through a side door into corridors absent from the public tours. They passed production studios where technicians edited sermon footage, a green room stocked with Richardson-branded water bottles, and what appeared to be a data center humming with the digital infrastructure of modern faith. Finally, they reached a small windowless room containing nothing but a desk, a chair, and a simple wooden cross on the wall. "My actual office," he explained, closing the door behind them. The contrast struck Eliza immediately. No luxury here, no carefully curated
Image. Just a worn Bible and a laptop with stickers from conferences and ministries. The space felt used rather than designed.
"Yesterday afternoon I was here preparing Sunday's sermon," Richardson said, his voice quieter in the confined space. The air changed, not the temperature or pressure, but something fundamental in its composition. Then I saw a light that didn't consume what it touched. The biblical allusion wasn't lost on Eliza, the burning bush undevoured by its own flame. "I couldn't move," he continued. Then a voice spoke a single sentence to me, a sentence containing information no one else could possibly know. His eyes held hers with unsettling directness. Information about my greatest moment of doubt, a private crisis of faith I've never shared with anyone. Despite herself, Eliza felt a chill traverse her spine. "What did the voice say?" "That's between me and God," Richardson answered, the boundary clear in his tone. "What matters is what happened next." When I could move again, I went immediately to the main chapel. 300 people were there for a prayer group. Every single one described the same experience. 73 seconds of complete stillness, followed by a personal
Message. Mass hallucination, she began, falling into the comfortable territory of scientific explanation.
"Is your automatic response," he finished for her, without hostility. But the messages were private, specific to each individual. Things no one else could know. His gaze held hers with uncomfortable insight. "You're not here by coincidence, Dr. Novak. You experienced something too." It wasn't a question. "I observed a data anomaly," she said, retreating to technical language. "An anomaly that spoke to you personally," he suggested. Her silence confirmed what she wouldn't articulate. Richardson nodded, accepting her unspoken admission. Science seeks evidence. Faith accepts revealed truth. Yesterday, thousands of people around the world received personal revelations simultaneously. That's not coincidence. That's not mass hysteria. That's divine intervention. There are other explanations, Eliza insisted, holding to her methodological foundation, such as she had theories, quantum field fluctuations affecting neurological function, targeted technological manipulation, even untested hypotheses about consciousness at the quantum level, but nothing that adequately explained the global scale or the personalized nature of the experiences. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "That's why I'm investigating." Richardson smiled with surprising gentleness. The scientist's honest answer. "I don't know yet." He returned to his desk and wrote something on a business card. "When you're ready to discuss what you actually saw, call my private number. Unlike your colleagues, I don't need empirical proof to believe you." "Thank you for your time, Pastor," Eliza said, taking the card and turning to leave. As she walked back to her car, her phone vibrated. An email from Sarah Goldstein. "Eliza, I've been collecting reports of a synchronized experience occurring approximately 30 hours ago across multiple continents, different interpretations based on cultural context, but consistent temporal markers, religious groups claiming divine revelation, but similar experiences reported in secular contexts. This is unprecedented."
In scale and consistency,
Eliza started her car but didn't drive immediately. First Richardson, now Goldstein, both suggesting something beyond ordinary explanation. The equations in her memory offered a third perspective, one that belonged to neither religion nor traditional science. Three paths diverging from the same inexplicable moment. She needed more data. The scientist in her, the one who'd replaced her father's religious certainty with empirical doubt, demanded verifiable evidence, but for the first time since childhood, a voice deep in her mind whispered a dangerous question. What if some truths
lay beyond conventional measurement? After Eliza left, Richardson stood motionless in his private office, listening to her footsteps recede down the corridor. Only when silence returned did the transformation begin, his shoulders dropping first,
then his carefully composed expression dissolving like sugar in rain. The practiced confidence that had carried him through thousands of sermons and media appearances evaporated, leaving behind the man few ever witnessed. He moved to his desk and opened the Bible with hands that betrayed him, trembling slightly as they turned to Jeremiah. "The heart is deceitful above all things. Who can understand it?" The memory of the burning light remained vivid, the voice still echoing in his consciousness. Had it truly spoken of his darkest moment, the night he'd knelt alone in this very office 5 years ago, cursing God after his most devoted follower died despite the healing Richardson had promised his congregation? How could anyone know what he had whispered in that private darkness? He closed the Bible and pressed his palms against his eyes until phosphonies danced in the darkness. "If this is you, give me clarity," he whispered into the empty room. "Let me be your servant, not my own." His phone vibrated against the desk, a cascade of notifications illuminating the screen. 23 messages in the past hour, most from other religious leaders reporting similar experiences across denominations and continents. The phenomenon was spreading geometrically, doubling every few hours. People would need guidance, interpretation, comfort. They would also need protection from those who would dismiss or manipulate their experiences. Richardson had observed how quickly institutions moved to control narratives that threatened established power structures. He'd built his early career criticizing exactly such moves by traditional religious authorities. "Guide me," he whispered again, his voice finding no echo in the small room. "Show me how to navigate this without becoming what I've always condemned." But even as he prayed for guidance, a different awareness stirred within him. His message had always resonated with those seeking certainty in an uncertain world. Now, when millions were experiencing something beyond conventional explanation, they would hunger for that certainty with unprecedented desperation. The voice had spoken directly to his moment of greatest doubt. Perhaps this was divine redemption, a second chance to truly serve, to provide meaning when institutions failed to do so, or perhaps, and here his thoughts moved into territory he would never articulate publicly. It was simply the perfect leverage to expand his influence beyond anything he had imagined possible. Richardson unlocked his phone, opening the draft message he'd prepared for his staff. On the screen, a carefully crafted announcement about the divine visitation waited for his approval. He had written and deleted it 3 times already, each version framing the experience differently, as confirmation, as challenge, as opportunity. His finger hovered over the word chosen before he deleted it again, replacing it with called. Language mattered. Framing determined not just how others would interpret the experience, but how he himself would understand his role within it. Whatever was happening, people needed a framework to understand it. Science would offer questions. He would offer answers. Time would tell which approach humanity needed more, or which would prove more dangerous in the face of the truly inexplicable. Imam Hassan Al-Farsi straightened the books on his office shelf, a ritual performed so often the motion had carved itself into muscle memory. The leather-bound Arabic commentaries aligned perfectly with Western physics journals. Between them, a worn copy of the Quran rested on a small wooden stand, its pages marked with colored tabs and margin notes in his precise handwriting. On his desk, faculty meeting minutes sat beside a half-finished paper comparing quantum entanglement to Sufi concepts of divine connection. Through the window of his corner office, earned after a decade of bridging theological divides that others declared uncrossable, afternoon light cast geometric shadows across the Isfahan carpet where he performed his prayers. The equilibrium he had cultivated throughout his career felt suddenly provisional, like a mathematical proof with an unacknowledged flaw. His phone screen illuminated with Cardinal Mendoza's name for the 3rd time today. The Vatican prelate's messages had grown increasingly urgent, each requesting conversation about the incident. Hassan's drafted response waited unsent, the words inadequate vessels for what had occurred. How to describe sacred text rearranging itself before his eyes? What language could capture centuries-old Arabic reforming to answer questions he'd written only in his private journal? The experience resided somewhere between revelation and hallucination, in territory his dual training in theology and science had never prepared him to navigate. The intercom tone interrupted his thoughts. "Imam Al-Farsi, your 3 o'clock appointment is here. Dr. Novak from Goddard Space Center." He touched the response button. "Please send her in." The woman who entered carried herself with the economy of movement common to laboratory scientists. No gesture without function, no expression without purpose, Her dark hair was secured at the nape of her neck, and she carried a tablet rather than a notebook. Her clothing, practical, neutral, unadorned, seemed selected to disappear from notice. "Thank you for agreeing to meet on such short notice," she said, extending her hand. "Dr. Eliza Novak." "The quantum physicist," he noted, returning the handshake. "Your work on observer effects in atmospheric modeling crosses my desk regularly. The Johansen equations you modified last year were particularly elegant." A brief current of surprise disturbed her composed expression. "You're familiar with quantum measurement theory?" "Science and faith both map the unknown," he said, gesturing toward a chair positioned to catch the afternoon light. "They use different instruments and mark different features, but the territory they explore remains the same." She sat, reassessing him with new interest. "That perspective isn't common among religious authorities." "Nor scientists," he replied, the slight smile acknowledging their shared observation. "What brings you to my office, Dr. Novak?" "I'm not here officially," she clarified, her posture shifting slightly. "This is personal research into reports of a synchronized experience yesterday. Witnesses across diverse backgrounds describe a moment where time seemed to pause, followed by some form of personalized message." Hassan felt his pulse quicken, the familiar tightness beneath his sternum that arrived with significant moments. He'd shared his experience with no one, not even colleagues who had studied alongside him for decades. "And you're investigating these reports scientifically?" he asked, keeping his voice measured. "I'm gathering data from multiple sources before formulating hypotheses," she replied, the careful language of professional caution. "A proper scientist indeed." He leaned back slightly, weighing discretion against the growing certainty that silence served no purpose now. "What if I told you I might have relevant information?" "I would ask you to share it," she said, "in as much detail as you're comfortable with." Hassan studied her face. The position he had built required discretion. Speculation about an imam's unconventional experiences could fracture hard-won credibility in both his communities. Yet her direct gaze suggested she sought understanding rather than academic conquest. "Yesterday, during afternoon prayers," he began, choosing each word with care, "I experienced something I cannot explain through either theological or scientific frameworks. The text of the Quran before me, words I've studied since childhood, rearranged themselves. Not physically, but in my perception." He paused, searching her expression for dismissal or judgment. Finding neither, he continued, "The new arrangement revealed an interpretation of a passage I've struggled with for years, one concerning humanity's relationship with knowledge. The traditional reading emphasizes acceptance of divine wisdom. What I saw suggested a different understanding, that questioning itself is a form of devotion. A message tailored specifically to your theological concerns," she noted, her voice neutral. "Yes." He hesitated before adding, "The voice that accompanied this vision spoke in classical Arabic, yet somehow I understood it to be neither human nor traditionally divine." Dr. Novak entered something into her tablet with measured keystrokes. "Did you note the duration of this experience?" "I did not check the time," he admitted. It felt both momentary and eternal, a description common to mystical experiences across our traditions, though useless for scientific measurement. Was anyone else present who experienced something similar? "I was alone." He gestured toward the prayer rug in the corner, its geometric patterns worn where his forehead had met the floor thousands of times. "But afterward, I received calls from 3 different mosques in the city. In each, entire congregations reported simultaneous experiences, different content, but identical timing." She nodded, making additional notations. And your interpretation of these events? That is where I find myself at an impasse, Hassan said, the admission settling in the space between them. Religious tradition would suggest divine revelation. Scientific thinking would propose mass hallucination or some as yet unexplained natural phenomenon. Neither framework seems adequate to contain this experience. To his surprise, Dr. Novak set aside her tablet entirely. The gesture shifted the quality of their exchange from formal interview to genuine conversation. Would it surprise you to learn that similar experiences have been reported not just in religious settings but in scientific institutions, including my own? The symmetry of their positions suddenly revealed itself. You experienced this phenomenon personally? I observed something that defies conventional explanation, she acknowledged, each word precisely chosen. Mathematical patterns that spoke directly to problems I've been working on. Messages uniquely meaningful to the observer, Hassan said. Across different interpretive frameworks, yes, which raises questions about the nature of the phenomenon. And its purpose, Hassan added. Eliza seemed to consider this new angle. Purpose implies intent. Does it? Hassan smiled slightly. Even natural systems display purpose without consciousness, as we understand it. Evolution optimizes without planning to do so. Fair point, she conceded. Though I prefer to establish what happened before speculating on why. The scientist's approach. Admirable, but perhaps incomplete in this case. Hassan reached for a book on his shelf. A translation of Ibn al-Haytham's 11th century works on optics. The father of the scientific method was a devout Muslim who saw no contradiction between empirical observation and spiritual understanding. You're suggesting I should consider religious frameworks in my investigation? I'm suggesting that unprecedented phenomena may require expanding our investigative tools. He returned the book to its precise location. What is your next step, Dr. Novak? I'm meeting with a scholar of comparative religion, Dr. Sarah Goldstein. Hassan nodded with recognition. I know her work on collective religious experiences, an excellent researcher. However, if I might make a suggestion, there's someone else you should speak with. Who? Cardinal Francisco Mendoza at the Vatican. He's been attempting to contact religious leaders across several faiths today, myself included. I suspect he has encountered this phenomenon as well, perhaps in a significant way. Eliza made a note of the name. Thank you for the suggestion, and for your candor. As she stood to leave, Hassan added, If I may ask, what do you hope to discover? Through this investigation? She paused at the door. The truth? Ah, he said with a gentle smile. The most elusive quarry of all. Perhaps consider that truth might be larger than any single framework we use to pursue it. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Hassan listened to her footsteps fade down the corridor before turning toward Mecca. The sunlight had shifted while they spoke, casting new patterns across his prayer rug. He knelt, touching his forehead to the worn fabric, but instead of reciting the familiar prayers, he found himself asking questions that yesterday would have felt like dangerous doubt. Today they felt like necessary steps toward understanding. Whatever had touched him, divine, cosmic, or something, yet uncategorized, had changed how he perceived the relationship between faith and inquiry. The questions themselves had become a form of devotion. When he rose, the cardinal's message still waited for response. Hassan composed a careful reply, agreeing to participate in the proposed dialogue while advocating for interpretative restraint. The experience had touched him deeply, but history had taught him the danger of hasty conclusions. How often had unexplained phenomena become weapons in the hands of those who sought power rather than understanding? The window on his computer displayed feeds from scholarly networks across the Islamic world, reports accumulating from Jakarta to Cairo to Istanbul, each describing variations of the same experience. The academic discussion forum where he moderated debates on Quranic interpretation had transformed overnight, filling with careful documentation of encounters with the inexplicable. 36 reports that morning. By afternoon 51, the phenomenon was accelerating. With acceleration would come demand for explanation, for framework, for meaning. The question wasn't whether humanity would respond to this phenomenon. The question was whether wisdom would guide that response before certainty hardened into doctrine.